Here it is. All right, we're off and running, Justin. Peace be with you.
And also with you.
Thank you, sir. Welcome, everyone, and happy Thursday. It is noon Eastern time here on the East Coast, just outside the booming metropolis of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We're in a small little quaint town called Ambler, PA. Ambler, PA, just outside of Philadelphia, Thursdays, noon Eastern time. You know what that means. It is time for Talent Experience Live, your weekly look at all things talent acquisition, talent management, human resources as a whole, and of course, artificial intelligence in AI. This program proudly brought to you by the good folks here at Phenom, whose purpose is to help 1 billion find the right work. That, of course, is why we host this podcast on a weekly basis, why we also have a wonderful podcast with Cliff Yerkowitz called Unusual Attitudes that comes out every month on Mondays. We also have a plethora of fantastic webinars, live events. We're at every single HR tech event under the sun. And one of those events that's coming up is the HR Innovation Showcase next week, April 22nd, Wednesday. You won't want to miss that. And so much more. Hop on to phenom.com. Check us out. See what you can learn. AI and HR, we are at the cutting edge of technology and so much more. And you may be thinking to yourself, Devin, helping 1 billion find the right work, that's one tall task. You can't possibly do that through podcasts, webinars, and events. And yes, we can. No, I'm kidding. The real way that we do that is through our applied artificial intelligence platform, which helps candidates find the right fit faster, employees evolve in their current roles and beyond, recruiters achieve next level productivity and efficiency, and managers get to build better teams through data automation and analytics. And of course, all of that is powered by artificial intelligence and machine learning. So if you're interested in learning more, don't walk to phenom.com, where you'll see a nice little blue banner at the top promoting the HR Innovation Showcase. I mentioned before, it's April 22nd. We're going to dive into all of the technology announcements we had at I Am Phenom just a few short weeks ago, and it is a live event, so you can answer questions in the chat. Or you can ask questions in the chat, and they will be answered. And you can show up to your next team meeting smarter than everyone else, so you won't want to miss it. Now, I teased AI quite a bit there, and that is a fantastic segue, if I do say so myself, to today's episode. Over the past month or so, we have been tackling the different levels of AI in HR, specifically the 6 levels of intelligence and automation. We started at level 0, which is where a lot of organizations are, where they're starting to get their bearings. They're testing out a few different technologies and different use cases. But today we are going to get to the exciting stuff. Today we are getting to where organizations maybe may not be today, but where they will be in the future. And that is level 5. This is part 6 of the 6 levels of intelligence and automation. It's one that I've been looking forward to for weeks. I know a few short months ago, I had a Talent Experience Live with Joanna Keel on, and she had mentioned that nobody's at level 5 yet. We're going to chat with our interim expert here, a product marketing manager, Raghu, to chat a little bit more about this today. And without any further hesitation, let's bring Raghu onto the program to learn more. Raghu, how are you?
Well, I'm doing good, Devin. Thank you so much for inviting me for TXL. And
no, I'm excited to have you. This is fun stuff. Before we get into it, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us, how long you've been with Phenom, what you oversee, what your focus is on.
Yep. So I work in product marketing at Phenom, and I cover Phenom Hire and a couple of our industry verticals here. So I think I'm genuinely excited about closing the series, because I think closing out is kind of a right framing that I would like to use here, because what we are doing today, or Devin, the conversations that we are having today isn't about wrapping up the levels that we spoke about, but I think we are trying to open a very big conversation here. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, no, it is exciting to have this conversation. And I think once you're at a level 5, the job isn't done. The work isn't finished. You can continue to push forward and continue to innovate. But one of the ways that we defined level 5 here at Phenom is through fully integrated technology when it comes to automation and intelligence. How is that different from what most organizations think it is? And I think the answer here may be, we talk about API integrations and things like that. What does fully integrated mean in terms of automation and intelligence?
Yep. I think this is such a good place to start because I want to, over the time we hear like the word fully integrated in the HR tech widely used and abused, and everybody nods and nobody defines it the same way. When most organizations say they are integrated, what they usually means are they are just connected. Like, our ATS talks to our CRM. That isn't integration. I think that's more like plumbing. Integration at level 5 means AI is not a feature inside your HR processes, but it is the process. You know, there's no handoff between the tools and the workflows anymore. They're all the same thing. Maybe you could think of it like a difference between a GPS app on your mobile phone and a self driving car. Both have the maps, both have the real time data, but one is giving you the directions that you still need to execute, while the other is just executing. So, level 5 is the self driving version, except the HR is still in the car. You are not just doing all the driving anymore.
Yeah.
And to be honest, if you look at one of the benchmarks data that we have, and like you have mentioned, less than 1% of organizations have achieved level 4 intelligence so far. So level 5 is genuinely rare. So part of this is because people confuse activation with integration. You can probably turn a feature on and still be nowhere near integrated.
No, a couple things that I want to call out there is you mentioned integration as it's used currently in human resources is things just being connected. And if that's the case, Raghu, I'm integrated with over 4,000 people on LinkedIn, which I know is what we're broadcasting from today. I don't know a lot of these people, right? We share knowledge. I follow them, for their insights and things like that. But it doesn't mean that we have a full integration connection, right? I wouldn't be able to pick most of them out on the street. The other thing that you mentioned there was level 4 has been achieved by less than 1% of organizations today. And the analogy that I'm going to use, while I do love the one that you'd mentioned there from the self-driving car, is marathons. Raghu, I think a lot of people that we work with know I love to run. I've never completed a marathon. It is my next goal. I have one signed up in November. 1% of the world's population has completed a marathon, right? That is not a lot of people. And what we're talking about is even less than that, and that's ultra marathons. That's the 100 milers that people do. I have no aspirations to get there, but it is such a slim number of folks. But people are still doing. People are still pushing the boundaries, and that's what we're talking about today when it comes to HR tech. Is just because the population isn't there yet and isn't doing it doesn't mean that you can't achieve it and you can't get there as well. What I want to talk to you about, though, for our next question, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that self-driving car aspect. You mentioned that HR is still in the vehicle. How does their work actually change at level 5? Of course, they're still along for the ride. They still have to have some oversight. They still have to follow compliance. But what does the team spend time on when AI starts to pick up and handle a lot of this work, getting them from point A to point B?
I think you know I think this conversation around AI and automation is one thing that makes people a little nervous, right? And like, because there's natural anxiety there. Like, is AI replacing our jobs, or is AI taking away the HR entity altogether? And the answer is genuinely no. But to be very honest, the role does change, like pretty significantly, and honestly for the better. Think about where recruiters and HR spend their time today. A huge chunk of it goes into coordination, administration, scheduling, following up, status updates. Yes, I do agree it's important work, but not the work that energizes people or drives real business impact. So, to answer your question, level 5 gives that back, gives this time back. And now you might ask me like, hey, what do you do with that time, right? So I think this is where it gets exciting. And in one of my conversations I was having with the customers, uh, so they did mention that uh, the time they would want to use is around talent advising, ethics management, or aligning talent decisions to the right business purposes. And more importantly, I think in the world of HR, empathy is most underrated value or skill. So the real genuine empathy with candidates and employees, that is not something that AI can replicate. Your team fit, culture fit, the judgment calls, that requires someone who actually understands your business organization, your goals, and the overall influence they can have in the decision making process there.
Yeah.
So that's what HR gets to own at level 5. The shift is from recruiter as a task executor to a recruiter as a talent advisor, maybe for HR as a back office support to a HR as talent experience designer and builder of talent intelligence for that matter. And I think that's a pretty meaningful elevation, if you ask me.
No,
So
it's. Oh, did I cut you off?
now that's all right. So, maybe I would like to phrase it a way, say like AI handles the volume where human handles the variables. So at level 5, that's not a nice sounding principle anymore. That's, I think, the right operating model.
Yeah. No, and I think giving them time back as a talent advisor is something that we've spoken about here at Phenom for years. And one of the biggest challenges was the additional work that they had, right? We talked about scheduling previously. We've talked about a lot of these things. But now, if you start to incorporate all of those features, is the wrong word, but all of those technologies together, they truly have the opportunity to become those talent advisors, to have those personal conversations, to handle some of those variables that you mentioned. One of the things you mentioned at the top of that was the fear around AI. And I was listening to a podcast this morning that I think framed it really well. Was before the automobile was invented, everyone traveled around via horse, right? It was all on horseback, and with that became horse breeders, horse trainers, all sorts of things. People that cleaned up the manure in the streets, all of these jobs, right? And then the automobile came around, and those jobs were gone, right? But instead of those jobs being completely vacated, they really just changed, right? All of a sudden, there were auto mechanics, there are, auto dealers, there are gas station attendants, people that work on cars for oil changes, people that are advancing that technology. Yes, it was fearful at the time. However, all that happened and all that happens in technology evolution is job changes, and it's just happening at a rapid pace right now. But what you're saying is there's still going to be work for recruiters, which I think is what we all want to hear at the end of the day. We talked a lot about what that advising, shift of mindset will be. But walk us through what an end-to-end agent-driven workflow really looks like in practice. How does this, rubber meet the road when it comes to what recruiters will do on a daily basis?
Yep, I think that's a very interesting question. And also, like you just put it, we have heard a lot of conversations around how uh, recruiters are moving into talent advisors. But when it comes to the talk of what AI can do, so let me make this with a concrete example. I think that lands better with everybody out there. So let's say in financial services, a bank needs to hire 30 relationship managers across 3 regional offices. So the moment those requisitions go live, agents are already working. So, for example, a sourcing agent is pulling from talent pool, sourcing candidates against the role, and building a prioritized shortlist. And then we have a candidate concierge, uh, which is handling every inbound question, status updates, interview preps, and next steps without recruiter touching it at all. And maybe a voice screening agent, right, is conducting AI enabled screens in the background. So by the time a recruiter sits down in the morning, they are not looking at raw applications anymore. They are looking at a very curated, screened, engagement ready list. So, that's just the front end. And the system doesn't stop at the offer letter. There are these agents supporting onboarding, compliance, career development, retention, and the whole process just keeps running and running behind the scenes. Now, what truly makes this end to end is that these agents aren't working in silos. I would like to stress this that they are not working in silos anymore. They are talking to each other, handing off to each other, operating as one connected system across the life cycle. And I think that's the difference between automation and orchestration. And
Yeah.
that's what you get at level 5.
Yeah, one thing I selfishly I'm going to call this out, Raghu, is you mentioned concrete there. I often refer to what I do as concrete. I refer to myself as the concrete team. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I am on the content team. I run our social media, and I am a combination between this content writing and creative aspect there, and real content creation. And the reason I'm able to kind of balance those two acts is thankfully because of AI, right? I can generate images and start to create things at a much rapid pace without the skill set that the graphic designers have. Of course, there is work that they still have to do and things like that. But I'm making memes, Raghu, right? Yeah, I can do that. I can spin that up real quickly. And you mentioned this kind of crossroads of removing those barriers for the talent acquisition teams in order to really multiply, I think, their skill set in a number of different variables, right? They no longer have to be extraordinarily well versed in offer letter language or in things like that. They can rely on agents to get that out and answer some of those FAQs and questions. They can focus on those human relationships. And if there is a snag in the system, if a candidate needs a little bit more information or needs to have that conversation because of extenuating circumstances, the recruiter is able to step in and do that. And they really become a jack of all trades, if you will. But all of this sounds great in theory, right? We're talking about everything running smoothly and everyone achieving level 5 in due time, of course, because it is a phased approach. You have to take steps to move up in these levels. But where do most organizations have snags? Where do they run into challenges that prevent them from achieving level 5? Since you mentioned at the top of the program, only 1% of organizations are at level 4. What's keeping them from getting to level 5?
Mhm. Yep, that's a very good question, Devin. So, this is actually a very important context. In one of the articles that I was reading, it pretty explicitly says that no organization has fully achieved level 5 yet. And, it's largely aspirational today. So, which I uh, think is actually a very healthy framing because it means that the question becomes what are we working towards rather than why haven't we arrived already there, right? So the things that are like snag in the organization or in the system or the stalls are, I think, the few that come up to my mind or in the conversations that I've been having consistently are the first one could be, is that they don't know where they stand today. Without a maturity framework, AI plans stay abstract. You can chart a path if you don't know your starting point, right? So, and the second is a scattered point solutions. Organizations add these disconnected tools that individually might be good, but they don't add up to a coherent strategy. And one source puts it really plainly, you cannot automate a process that doesn't exist. And I think that's very true. If your workforces are messy and manual underneath, adding an AI on top of that doesn't fix it at all. It just automates that mess. So, in computer science, there is this principle called garbage in, garbage out. So, what you put in is what you get out. And that's the same. And the other reason is there's also this structural problem. Like, in the HR world, there is this 12 to 18-month lag between the business strategy and the HR operating model. So the businesses are moving, but the HR scrambles to catch up. Now that gap is a real barrier to a sustained maturity. And to be very honest, I think change management also plays a key role here. Internal training or finding your champions or running those boot camps, the technology can be ready, but the org can still stall because nobody is building a human infrastructure around that technology. What I would like to say is we are over focusing on AI features instead of business outcomes is a version of this too. So this is where I think most of the organizations are stalling behind.
Yeah. No, you mentioned garbage in, garbage out. It reminds me of something I heard one of the athletic trainers at the gym say the other day is you can't outrun a bad diet, right, Raghu? If you go and run 3 miles and you go home and eat 3 pints of ice cream, you're still going to look the same, right? And what you mentioned there with some of the gadgets and tools and things like that that don't connect, they aren't properly integrated. They're just friends on Facebook. Is where you're going to run into the other issues, right? You can buy all of the fancy running equipment and everything like that, but if you're not putting a rubber to the road, you're not continuing to be active, you're still going to run into these challenges. As you put it, you can't automate a process that doesn't exist. But one of the aspects that I know is coming up with this is as all of this technology increases, as folks begin to work towards level 5, as autonomy increases as a whole, how do organizations build accountability between the humans and the AI? How does that need to evolve in future processes? Because the more technology we move, the more that we have to be knowledgeable of, the more that we have to understand, especially when it comes to trust. We're trusting the cars to get us from point A to point B without driving, Raghu. How do we build that trust and accountability if it runs a red light? What are sort of some of the processes in place?
Yep. So, yeah, I think this is one of the conversations that I was expecting you to ask, Devin. So, and I think I might get a little philosophical here for a second, so bear with me. Trust is earned, right? Like, even in human relationships, you give someone a responsibility incrementally. You see how you handle it, you build the confidence, and then you give them more. It's the same with AI maturity, and that's how the AI maturity curve also looks like. So you don't hand the keys over on the day one. You start with a narrow workflow, or maybe you measure it obsessively, and you earn the confidence to expand that autonomy. Now, you have also asked about accountability, and I think that's where it's gonna flip the strategy because accountability on the flip side. Here's the thing, you know, I want to be very, very clear about this. Like AI replaces HR. Okay, I can already hear some gasps there. But when I say AI replaces HR, it changes how work is executed, but not who owns it, right? Like decision making and accountability will remain with HR teams only. Even as organizations adopt AI agents or any other automations, the responsibility just doesn't disappear. Agents handle the execution at scale while humans retain that oversight, judgment, and control over the outcomes. So, I go back to this very famous line in the Spider-Man movie, like with great power comes great responsibility. So similarly, with high autonomy requires high accountability as well. So when you're evolving to level 5, you need to have a clear audit trails, explainability, escalation paths, and a strict rigid governance frameworks. AI is doing more, but the humans are more accountable as well, not less for setting the rules it operates under. So, yeah, this is how it goes in the level 5, Devin.
Yeah. No, I think humans are always going to be responsible at the end of the day, right? It is it's something, it's not the cars that get in car accidents. It's not, the machinery that fails. It is usually operator error that happens. So continuing to have that accountability. And I also love the sentiment that you had there around trust, that it's earned, that it comes bit by bit. I'm not going to let my daughter, who's 4 years old, go out and run around the block right now. She hasn't earned that trust. She's not nearly old enough. I understand her levels of maturity, and this should be looked at in a very similar lens, right? As you're rolling out this technology, but obviously things are going to happen, right? My daughter is going to break my trust at some point, whether I like it or not. She's going to, stay out late when she's in her teenage years. She's not going to call me back when she's in college, whatever it may be. What does it take to sustain a level of trust and maturity over time? Where does level five happen to have its pitfalls? Where do most organizations do you foresee, since there's so few actually operating at this level? Where do you think that they would slip and fall back? Is it some of those things that you mentioned where they're relying too heavily on the artificial intelligence itself, where they're not taking accountability? What does that look like in your eyes?
Yep. So I think I would take like the analogy that you brought up earlier, Devin, around the marathon. Like, for any marathon runner, you need to train for that, right? Like you spend like maybe 6 months or 8 months before the marathon, and you start training yourself, and you actually build that physique and that stamina and that endurance that you need to finish that marathon. So think of it like, so far. To reach level 5 automation, you have done all that prep work, and you have prepped yourself really good. But once you're done with your marathon, you just go back and start chugging like 3 liters of ice cream or whatsoever. So that's where the slump really looks like, right? So that's when the slide starts. So then similarly, um, sustaining level 5 is actually harder than reaching it. Like, I think that surprises most of the people. And because I also think that most of the people might think reaching to the level 5 is like they have reached a goal. So when you go there, you might be tempted to say like, hey, I've reached it, and you have conquered something great, and then you move on. But that's where it all begins. When you're sustaining a high maturity requires operational discipline around things like change management, enablement, training champions, the business process mapping, the adoption metrics, and the proactive monitoring that you need. And also one of the underrated step is around the multi-threaded relationship development inside the organizations. Meaning, if your whole AI program lives inside a head of one champion and that person leaves, your maturity just leaves with them, right? What causes these regressions are around like leadership changes, loss of institutional knowledges, and platform evolutions and adoptions, right? So, and then the big structural one, HR and business strategies falling out of real-time alignment. The sources are really explicit about this. If, if that alignment breaks, your maturity erodes, even if the tools are still in place. So, be it a marathon or sustaining a level 5 is all less about technology and more about operational discipline and your organizational health. The tech is definitely needed, but not sufficient.
Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense, and I love you tying back that marathon analogy, because yes, it is an achievement to get to level five, but you don't stay at that level of fitness, right? And it's the same thing when it comes to AI tools today. I'm leveraging them on a daily basis, and every single day it's a new product release. It is a new technology. It is a new AI, GPT that you're able to generate pictures on or able to get code from. One day it's Anthropic's Cloud Cowork. The next day it's Gemini. The whole thing, it's a constant evolution. And one thing that you pointed out was that knowledge sharing that really needs to take place, because if a champion leaves, they're taking all of their knowledge with it as well. So the entire team truly needs to continue to push the boundaries, continue to innovate, and continue to educate themselves, because I think level five is almost a never-ending scale, right? It is something that you've achieved this level of maturity, but you can't go beyond it. You have to work hard to maintain it. You have to improve your time in a marathon. It's the new baseline, I think, as you put it, but not a finish line. So this brings me to my last and final question here for you. What does this mean? If level five is the goal, but it is a never-ending story where you have to continue to push the boundaries, what comes after? Is it something that we don't know yet? What can we expect down the line as we start to learn more about level five?
Yep. I think I really love this question, and I love to. I mean, like ending this topic on this question is also like really interesting, because this frames the whole conversation in a very meaningful way. Like you just said, finish line kind of implies you stop. But in reality, or in the world of HR, the talent or the market, the skills, the workforce, none of that's stopping, right? The world is moving. So if you assume that level 5 is your finish line, you're already behind. The new baseline, and if I have to frame it, is fully integrated automation, fully integrated intelligence with real time analytics, agent driven workflows. So that's not the ceiling anymore. That's the foundation. That's the table stakes for competing at the speed the market demands today. And okay, I want to close this with an analogy I think that captures this perfectly. Bear with me, I think it might get a little nerdy, but but I promise I think it lands. So, um, in the Avengers Endgame, we had Thanos, and his whole journey was to collect those six Infinity Stones, right? So each stone is incredible on its own. Like there's time, space, mind, soul, reality, and power. Individually powerful. But Thanos spent his whole journey collecting them. And honestly, most organizations are still in that phase. They have got maybe one stone or maybe two, a scheduling tool here, or an AI screening feature there. Impressive in isolation, but not at the gauntlet level. So level 5 is where you have assembled all of these, like a fully integrated automation, fully integrated intelligence, with agent driven workflows and continuous optimization and strong governance, all of it working together. And that's the gauntlet. And that's the complete picture. Now, if I may so, here is where I kind of like to flip the analogy a bit, and this is the part I really really love. Okay, so when Thanos snaps, okay, he removes half of the universe, wipes out almost everything, and that's exactly what people fear AI will do to them, right? That's the anxiety underneath every one of these conversations that we have been having so far. AI is coming for our jobs, HR is, going to get snapped away. But at level 5, when HR snaps, you are not removing, you are adding the speed to hiring, adding personalization to every candidate interaction, adding intelligence to every decision, and maybe the capacity back to the and giving back the capacity back to the recruiters so that they can do the work that actually matters. So same snap, a complete opposite outcome. While and like at level 5 and at this level, the HR uses the gauntlet, like I like to call it, to give to the organization. And that honestly is the most human thing to do in this whole journey. The more powerful the system becomes, the more it frees humans to do what exactly they are meant to do. And I think that's the power of level 5 when you get there. And that's the gauntlet. But I think that's the future we're all striving to build, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that analogy, Raghu. This is um, work has become a what have you done for me lately sort of league, if you will, right?
Mhm.
We are going to continue to push the boundaries, and I love that analogy with Thanos snapping and giving time back, improving speed to hire. It's not wiping out jobs or anything like that. It is improving the way we do work, the way that we do things, because you're able to do so much more with less, quite frankly, and hopefully that results in less time with you working, more time spending with your loved ones, your family, more time spending as a talent advisor, and more time enjoying life. Raghu, thank you so much for joining me today. You know what? I think we should snap on our way out. We'll snap back and we'll go back to our homes and enjoy the rest of your day. So I appreciate it. And on the count of three, we'll do it. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Thank you so much. Um, you'll be gone off the screen
Yeah.
now. All right. Um, So I want to thank everyone today for tuning in to Talent Experience Live as we wrap up the levels conversation. But as Raghu had just mentioned, it's not over. This is only just the beginning. Level 5 becomes the baseline. You are now a marathon runner. It is time to set new records, to try new races, to blaze new trails, and continue to push and innovate forward. Because that's the world that we live in. We as humans have always wanted to innovate, always wanted to create, and always wanted to do more. It is how we have gotten to this time and place. So if you've missed any of the conversation as to how to get to level 5, whether it be level 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, feel free to check them out. They're all on our YouTube. They're all on LinkedIn. We'll probably do a nice little recap video in the coming weeks with all of them together, explaining the 5 levels in a brief cliff notes, because we're all trying to save time. But in the meantime, I hope everyone has a safe, happy, and healthy weekend. Don't forget to check out the HR Innovation Showcase next week, April 22nd. That's Wednesday, so it's going to be right before TXL. And I hope everyone has a safe, happy, healthy weekend. We'll see you then. Thanks so much. Bye.